Hi everybody, welcome back. It's good to see you. Today we're going to make a brick wall material in Substance Designer. Bricks are one of the more challenging materials to make, so hopefully we can get through and make something that's relatively convincing. They can get kind of complicated, so we're just going to kind of dive in and we're going to go over just the best practices and best ways to make materials. These materials are going to be implemented in my starting with Unreal Engine videos. We're going to use those to put on the walls and floors of some of the blockouts that we'd created just to show how to do that. So here we go. Let's just get into it. So you'll see here I already have a texture graph open. That's because I had to set things up in order to do this tutorial. To get to this point, you go to File, New, Substance Graph, and then you pick Metallic Roughness right here. And you can name it whatever you want and just hit OK. And that's the one we're going to be working on today. Now, we're going to make a more simple material. A lot of people, when they do like a substance tutorial, they'll do a pretty complicated material that maybe you wouldn't even use in a game. This is the goal of this is to make something that you're going to use and is game ready, and it'll go right into the engine and you can use it. A lot of the other tutorials that are out there, and I'm not like knocking them or anything, but they use a lot of features and functions of like the height map to bump things out with tessellation or maybe parallax occlusion, stuff that you wouldn't always use. You can use in games, but this is the most standard stuff that you would use in a game. Industry standard, just about used all the time. So the first thing, once we open our substance graph here, is we want to get rid of the ones we're not going to use. So we're not going to use metallic, ambient occlusion, and height for this. So we'll just grab those and delete them out. Okay, so now we're just going to start with our normal map right here, and that's the basics. Typically with textures, once you get a good normal map or a good height map to plug into the normal map, then all the other, like your color and your roughness, are easier to make. So we're going to just start with the normal map, and since we're going to do bricks, we're just going to do a brick generator. So if you hit the space bar here and you look up brick, you go down to brick generator here, click on that, and there you go, there's your brick generator. Let's plug that in right away into our normal map. And right off the bat, you can see, if you bring up our 3D view, maximize it, you can see that the brick generator is doing its work, just bumping. There's no color or anything else there. Let's actually knock the roughness up a little bit so we don't have such a shiny bricks. Let's click on this uniform color here and bump that up to, I don't know, higher so that we don't have to, so it's not shiny. All right, so now let's go to the normal here, and you'll see over here on the right that the normal intensity is set to 1. Let's set that to 3, and that'll make our bump map come out a little bit. See, our normal map is stronger. All right, so now let's put in our settings for our brick generator, and these are the pretty important settings. So for number of bricks over here on the right, let's put 6 on the X, and let's put 14 on the Y. And you'll see right now, this is the kind of what we're going to get for number of bricks for our wall. Now, we're going to base this on about a 5 foot by 5 foot section for a 20 by 48. So it's always a good idea to have an idea of exactly how you're going to scale your materials to your world before you even build them. We're not just building something to look cool today. We're actually building something that we're going to use, and you can use to build up your material library. And we're going to run through quite a few different textures and materials, and then we're going to actually implement them into Unreal at some point after we make maybe about 4. Okay, so still in your brick generator here, let's add to this gap. Let's change this gap just a tiny bit. Let's go 0.01, and what you see that does, 0.01, what you see that does is it kind of separates these bricks out from each other. You can see in the 2D view here. Always zoom into your 2D view, always zoom into your 3D view, and you can get a good idea of what's happening with your height map. So let's change the middle size here next. And we'll go 0.52, and then let's go 0.48. And what changing the middle size does is it kind of varies the size of the bricks very slightly. And it's hard to notice, but these are supposed to be the same size bricks, so they're going to be generally close. But this will help it look a little bit different. It's hard to see, but if you do pull the slider up, you can then see how it does change the size of some of the bricks, and it moves some in and some out. So we're going to keep it at 0.52. But then the slope. Now the slope is like how it slopes one way or another. If the brick is kind of in there a little angled. Now if on a brick wall, you're not going to have a lot of this in a real world situation, but it's going to help the normal map look more like a height map. It's going to reflect the light in different directions, and it's going to make it look more realistic. So we kind of want to blow it out whenever we're using a normal map without a height map. So we're going to kind of increase this slope quite a bit. We're going to knock this up 0.7, 0.7, and you can see the gradients that start to arrive in that. And then the balance, we want to go negative 0.56. And then for variation, we want all the way up to 1. Okay? Now you can start to see that slope being applied. And if you look in your 3D view here, you can kind of see how some of the bricks have different shading on each one of them. Okay? And I know we're spending a lot of time on this brick generator node. This is going to be the most important node. It's going to be the one that takes the most time. So now we're going to offset our bricks. Right here it says 0.5 for offset. That's what we're going to leave it at, but we're going to add a little bit of variation. So let's say 0.2. And now you can see our bricks all moved around a little bit. So now let's go back up to the top and we'll kind of randomize it a little bit. Okay, so now we have a little bit of randomness to our bricks there, okay? So now we have quite a bit of stuff with our bricks done, but we still have to change the bevel. So go back up towards the top, and it's where it says bevel here, and we're going to knock that down because we don't want our bricks to look so blocky, like these huge blocks. So we're going to knock X down to 0.15. We're going to knock Y to 0.15. And now you see they're coming together, and now they're more bricky looking. We're going to do some smoothness to them. So if you zoom in a little bit, let's do smoothness 0.33. And then we'll round the corners just a little bit at 0.94. And there you go. That's just our very base. Now, the reason we did all of that is because we can get some variation. You can see the different variation in the brick faces here. They kind of pop out, they kind of pop in, but it's not quite where we want it yet. So there's going to be quite a bit more we do, but that's a good start. Bricks are one of the easiest things to, I just threw the pattern together and make a really simple one, but to actually get it to look convincing, it starts to get complicated. So this is the very beginning, and we'll shut that down. And you'll find in Substance Designer, what you'll do a lot of the times is warping your map to try to give it some variation along these lines here. You can see they're very straight, and you can see the bricks right now. I mean, maybe for a certain type of game would look pretty good. So what you'll see when you look in here is everything looks pretty straight and pretty uniform, not really convincingly real, but could be used for like a stylized type of game. And usually that would be a lot easier to make the textures for. So let's do a warp on this brick generator. So if you hit space, you can look up warp. And let's just do a regular one. So we'll import our brick generator into the warp. And now let's warp it with something. Let's do like a fractal sum. So look up fractal sum. It should be a fractal sum 4 is the one that I like sometimes. Let's plug that in. Now you can look at what your warp is doing. we want to knock that warp quite a bit down. Say, I'm actually going to type in a number, 0.025, see what that looks like. And now let's plug that into our normal map and we'll see the results, right? So now you see it warps it, and you can see it adds all of this goofy stuff to it. Which, you know, isn't going to be good enough, but it's a way to start. So what I want to do is I want to change this what I'm using to warp a little bit so it's not warping quite everything. See how right now it's warping everything and you can see it kind of just makes everything look wavy. We're going to change our height map that we use to make the warp. Okay, so now we're going to blend. Let's put an input in here. Let's do input grayscale because we're going to blend a grayscale with the fractal sum here. We're going to put a value in like about in the middle here, okay? And then to do a blend node. And then this over the top of just the base color there. And what we're going to do here is we're going to make it so that this doesn't warp everything. So we're going to need a mask to blend those two things together. So let's look up Voronoi. Voronoi fractal, and let's do a blur. Connect the Voronoi into the blur. Let's go back to our Voronoi. We're going to drop the scale down of the Voronoi here. It's at 8 right now, so let's go to 7.5. Now you can always change these values later. These are the ones I've previously created this material, and we're going to try to copy that as much as possible, but these are all adjustable. To try to make this on the fly, there would be a lot of pausing, a lot of testing, and it would take forever. So we're going to do it this way. So now we're going to add a levels in. So we're going to connect our blur into our levels. So then what we're going to try to do is we're going to pull these level handles together to try to condense the colors and make a mask out of it. So let's pull these in and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Now you can see we're getting a more contrasty black and white mask with a lot less of the blurry clouds, right? So maybe something like that is a good start. Let's do a couple randomizes on the Voronoi. And then I'm going to use this as a mask to mask the fractal sum and the gray together. And what that'll do is it'll make it so that this gray isn't really warping as much and the fractal sum will be warping. So like we'll push that in. And then the output, which we can look at here. So now looking at the output, let's adjust these levels a little bit more. I want it to be still a little bit more than that. So see how as the gray is filling in and becoming more clear, if I push these values. So we want the gray to be more constant. And you can play with this a lot, but like this is, we're going to try this. Plug that in to your warp. Now you'll see how it's warping some things and it's not warping other things as much. So you'll see like here's straight edges and some of them are warped and some of them are craggy, and that's a more realistic look we've got going on there. So if you want to go back, you can adjust all of these and hit the randomize button, and maybe we'll do that more towards the end because some of this is hard to follow exactly from a different tutorial, but so far this is what we've got. That's a pretty good start. We're starting to get more and more convincing as we go. So let's warp that one more time. So I'm going to pull this out a little bit further away. Eventually it's going to be way far away, but we want to be able to still test it with our normal map here. Let's warp this one more time. So let's connect into the warp. And this time we're going to just warp it with a purlin noise. That's pretty common practice for people who are working with Substance Designer. So we'll pop our purlin in. And let's scale this down to 22 on the right here. You see how that zooms it in. Now we're going to use this as our height map to warp our bricks again. Now this will kind of make it crazy. And you'll see there's the result of our warp, but we're going to have to change the warp strength. So for our warp intensity, we want to knock it down. You'll see as you go down further and further, and you can see here in the view, you're down further and further and further, eventually your thing starts to reconstruct itself, right? So we'll stay at about 0.6. Okay. Now let's plug this into our normal map. Craziness all the way around. But don't worry, we will fix that. Not fix it, but this is part of the features. This is part of what's going to make it look really good later. So now what I want to do is I want to work on the height map itself, and we're going to blur parts of it so that it's seemingly, some of the edges are a little bit, they seem to go into the wall, and some of them pop out of the wall more. The ones that pop out of the wall more are going to be the ones that are hard right now, but we're going to try to blur some of those edges so it seems like things kind of start flowing into the wall. So let's put in a blur node. Okay. And we're going to blur our height map we got going on right now. And we're going to drop the blur intensity down to 1. And that kind of makes it a lot blurrier. Not a lot blurrier, but blurrier so that it won't be as crunchy in the normal map. We can even plug it in if we want. The intensity went to 0, so we'll make the intensity 1. I was wondering what it was doing. So there you go. Now you got it nice and blurry. And then what we want to do is we want to blend the blurred version on one portion of it with the non-blurred version. So we're going to go blend. And then for the top, we're going to plug in the first version, and for the bottom, we're going to plug in the blurred. Now, in order to blend these two together, we're going to use the same height map, but we're going to do some levels to it. So we'll put levels in. Bonk. And use that for our mask that we blur things together with. So now on the levels, we want to pull these arms together. Now, if you look, some of these edges now are blurrier and some of them are not. And they're kind of like, some of them seem to be popping out and some of them seem to be popping in, and that's the effect we're going for. And you can play with some of these values in the future, but this is the general idea right here. I'm not going to copy the levels of the original one I made perfectly, so we should still look good when we're done. I want this a little bit more dark on the gradients. Something more like that, maybe. Let's look at it in a 3D view. Yeah, that's starting to come together better. So now you'll see some of the parts are blurred, some of the parts are crunchy. So we're adding a bunch of detail, right? There'll be more. So we blended those two together, and this was some of the more tricky stuff in the whole material. A lot of it'll go smooth from here on out. Okay, so now we want to add another brick generator, and then we're going to use the same exact one we had. So we're going to grab this one, and we're going to go Control C, and we're going to pop it down here, Control V, right? So make sure it has the same exact settings as that one. And then we're going to blend these two together to make the map even crazier, right? It's going to really make it pop. So put a blend in. and we take the top one into here and the bottom one into here, and we'll look at we'll pay close attention to this blend, and then we'll set it to multiply, and it'll really pump everything together now. Let's plug that in so you can see the result. So now, as you can see, what it's doing is popping things together, and now things are looking like they're more angled out and more angled in. But what we're going to do with this second brick generator here is we're just going to randomize it. Now that doesn't change anything of the properties, it just changes where the angles of the bricks are. And when you mix the new angles with the old angles, you're going to get all sorts of different angles for all the bricks. Right now you can see there's just a couple, but now when you do more, now it'll really start to pump them. And you can see, and this is kind of the effect you're looking for, right? This might be a good time too, if you want, is to start checking tiling. Because it's going to be a 5 foot by 5 foot, so you really want it to tile well. This looks pretty good. You can just keep hitting the randomize button if you want to change it up here and there. And as you can see from our 3D viewport, now we're starting to get more and more convincing with more normal maps. It doesn't just look like mapped boxes. Now it looks kind of like bricks are sticking out of the wall. It also looks like we have some crunchiness here and there. And yeah, that's exactly what we're looking for. So let's just keep on kicking along. I'm going to adjust my positioning here. You could see this is starting to become a thing, and it's going to become more of a thing. And you're going to get used to that in Substance Designer. So now this is a little too straight for me. So let's do another warp quick. So spacebar and warp. You're going to warp a lot. I'm telling you, this is going to be the one you use the most. So let's pop that in. And now let's just do a clouds noise, like a clouds 1. Pop that in for our warp. And look at the results. And then we're going to take the intensity way down. See if you can zoom in and kind of see. Like if you, even at 0.01, it's very strong. You don't want it to be quite that. Let's plug it into the normal map so you can see the output in the... You can see how crazy it starts to look. We don't want that at all. But we do want these edges to be a little bit varied. So we're going to go 0.002. Okay? And now you can see in there, now you have a little bit of variation. And if you look, you can kind of see it gives a little bit of variation everywhere and adds a little bit to the normal map. Just a little bit. So now our normal map is starting to look pretty good. Let's just put that back down. We can zoom in and out here. I want to add, now the bricks are still a little bit too smooth, so we want to add a little bit of more indentation. So let's hit spacebar and add, look for grunge maps. I want number 1. That's a pretty fun one, right? I want to make it so that it's moving more horizontally than vertically. So let's hit spacebar and go transform. Put a transform 2D in. Connect that into there. And in our transform 2D for rotation, let's put 90 degrees. In one of my other videos, I said 90% the whole time, so that was fun. So do it 90 degrees. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put in another color. So input uniform color. And this one I want all the way white. Because what we're going to do is we're going to use this grunge map to affect the height map. And what it's going to do is it's going to make indentations where the dark parts are. So we're going to add a little bit more white parts so it just doesn't do it uniformly across the whole deal. Kind of like what we did last time over here when we were doing our first warps. So let's put in a blend. Let's blend that over that. And then we're going to copy and paste. You can just connect it if you want, but I'm going to copy and paste these first three here, the Veroni, the blur, and the levels. So we're going to go Control C, then click down here, Control V. I'm copying and pasting that so that I can then adjust it later if I don't like the exact same mask as I used up here. You see we're getting an error here. This one's a red dotted line. This is good. I make mistakes just like everything else. This is uniform color. When you're mixing black and white maps together, you don't want to use color. So we're going to put in input, and this would be input grayscale. And then you can go to white and dunk and get rid of that. Okay. So now we're going to use our Veroni here and the stuff that we copied, and we're going to connect it into our blend. We need to zoom in a little bit better so you guys can see. So here's the three here. We're going to connect into that blend. Maybe move this down a touch. Okay. So here's the result of our blend, which is pretty good. But I'm thinking that maybe there's a little bit too much white. So let's adjust this a little bit. So the white is the map, and then the black on the levels down here is how much it's blending with the white. So what we need to do is make this white a little bit pop out a little bit more. Now you can see that what's happening in our mask here. We want to we don't want it too much, but we want more. Okay, so we're getting there. Something like that might be good. All right, so now we're going to blend this, our new grunge map, with our main map here. So let's put in a blend. And we want the blend to be over the top of the normal one. And then we want to plug in this levels as our mask. Okay. Now you can kind of see how crazy things are really getting. Let's plug that into our normal map. There we go. Now you can really see how that's kind of crunching in there. Now we're gonna lower that quite a bit down and everything, but you'll see the result here. So we lower this down to 0.25. All right, so let's mess with this levels a little bit more. This isn't quite what I want. So here, I'm going to actually copy the numbers over from the previous one I made. So to do that, you can open up the values here, and you can see the levels numbers. And now I'm going to put in the same ones. 0.274 for low, 0.507, and then 0.653, and then 0 and 1, and that should be more. All right, yeah, and you can see it and it also gives us this nice little, on some of the bricks it'll give us this nice little edge. We're gonna actually go back to our first levels up here, and we're gonna copy the numbers that I'd put in for my original texture, just to make sure that our final result is good. So again, when you're in your levels here, you can open up the rollout. 0.318, 0.5, 0.07. Zero 0.653. That looks good. And that looks good. Let's see what we've got now for our... Yeah, that looks really good. So our bricks are kind of coming along. You can see they do have some wear on them. And then there's some that don't have wear, and that's kind of like the key here. Okay, we're getting really close to being done with our normal map, which is great because that's the most complicated part usually of any of them. So I still want to add a little bit more bumpiness, but just very, very faint. So let's add in here, let's black and white spots. Just do a 1. And then we're going to invert that so that instead of being bumpy out, it pushes in. Pop that into there. And that's inverted. Now we're going to blend those together. I want to blend the spots over the main one. Okay, now go to our blend, and our blend is multiply and 0.1. Very soft. Now, this is a good point to also mention that looking in your viewport is a great way of kind of getting a general idea of what things are going to look like. But the reality is when you're making materials and textures, you should probably be moving things into the engine and testing them in there. Because what'll look good here in the lighting in this will not always translate into your engine. Your engine has different lighting. This is going to be using basically just a HDR cube map to light the environment. And your lighting in your engine's probably going to do that, but plus other things. So sometimes maybe the changes I make here and that look kind of interesting here, but like for some reason don't quite make any sense. The reason I did those is because they look better in engine, and you don't want to have, like, if you blow out that normal map stuff and all of the cuts inside, once you get it into your engine, it's not going to look right under different lighting situations. Okay, so continuing on, for the black and white spots, I noticed that I had changed the scale, so let's put that to 3. You can see that it'll make them really faint and smaller. And now I'm going to put in a little bit more detail. This is the end of the, so finally we're coming to the end of the normal map section. Put in some grunge shavings. Add an invert grayscale, like I was doing before. Now you can see it pushes in instead of out. Put a blend in. And let's blend our height map again. Bonk. We'll put the shavings over the top. And then we'll set our multiply mode at 0.2. All right, now if you look in here, you can see where they're pumping in. Now let's add that to our normal map and see what we've got. There you go. Now you've got those little shavings cutting in there too. And that is the end of our normal map. Now we're going to move on and we're going to start working on the color, which will be much, much easier. All right, so now let's try to do the color. This is already running pretty long, so we're going to kind of kick through the color. It's going to be quite a bit easier and quite a bit more understandable. So let's put in some colors. Let's kind of zoom in here. Let's put in some uniform colors. And now I'm going to just make a bunch of these. So let's just Control C, V, 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 V. So these are going to be the colors I'm going to use. They're going to add some variation to the different bricks. So let's just kind of move them into some different positions here, kind of close to each other. They're going to be kind of in pairs, as you can see them here. And then I'm going to just start putting in each individual color, and then we're going to work from there. So now, if you want, you can just take these hexes down, okay? So I'm going to kind of place them all in. So there's our first two colors. You can see the hex here, there, and the first color, hex there, okay? And that's how we're going to go through all of them. You can see the hex there. You can see the hex for this one. I'm probably going to cut in between me being goofy, so I'll just go, you can see the hex. You can see the hex for this one right here. And you can see the number for this one right here. You can see the hex for this one right here. And you can see the hex for the last one right here. Okay, so hopefully you could catch all of that. If you need to, pause the video or whatever. Hopefully I did that well, but otherwise you could try to follow these pretty close. So first we're going to kind of blend these colors together to make different color maps. So with the first two colors, let's kind of grab them and move them out a little bit. And let's pull in a blend. Top over bottom. Let's do a grunge map to blend them. Do grunge map 2. And then transform, because I want it horizontal instead of vertical. You can see really nice grunge map here. 90 degrees. Beautiful. We'll use this to blend those two colors together. And you can see there's our result. That's one color blended together. Now let's blend these two colors together. Put in a blend. Same thing, top over bottom. And if you wonder where I got these colors, I had a picture of bricks, and I just used the color picker. And then I tried to pick colors that weren't too contrasty with each other, because you don't really want them too contrasty at this point. But you could also copy the ones I used. So let's do the same thing, grunge map 2 here. But let's randomize it so it's not exactly the same. And let's put in transform 2D. And we'll do the same thing. We'll make it horizontal, 90 degrees here. Plop that into that. Now you have our two colors. You can look at them. Beautiful. We want to blend these two colors together, and we're going to do it with the map from our brick generator. So we want to grab our brick generator here. Just make a new copy. Don't change anything like number of bricks or anything, otherwise things will get messed up. Put a blend in. Blend the top color over the next color. And in the brick generator, we need to change some of our settings. We need to get rid of the slopes. We don't want that. So just down in slope, put 0, 0. Now you can see it's back to normal. And now what we want to do is basically use the height generation to make a mask to mix these two colors together to add different colored bricks. So let's go in here and see where it says height 1, max 1. If we go to variation, pump it all the way up, you see it makes a mask that we can use to alternate colors. So this is a good time to check the tiling also. This one maybe we'll randomize until we get something that doesn't look, zoom out a little bit. See, something like that's pretty good. You just don't want ones that are really zigzaggy or something that's very noticeable. I don't mind that. That looks great right there. So now we'll use this mask to blend those two colors together. Now we'll look at that, and now you can see we're starting to get our color map. See? Nice. Okay, so now for these two colors here, you see we did the first two sets and now this set. We'll move them over just a little bit. For these, we're going to blend these two together. Put in a blend. And then for this mask that we're going to use black and white spots 3. So B and W spots 3. Just leave everything as it is. Mix these two together. And then we'll look at it. And there you can see how it blended those two colors together. Okay, so now we'll move this a little bit so we can kind of have more room. We're going to blend this and that together. So put in a blend. Blend in this one. Blend in that one. And then now we're going to use, to blend these two together, we're going to do some ambient occlusion from our mask down here to blend this lighter color into this color here. So we come down here and find the one we want to generate the ambient occlusion from. So we open this up and we go RTAO. Okay. And I'm going to pull in this one here from down here. So if you look down here, it's this one that comes off the black and white spots, invert grayscale to blend. And then we'll pull this into here. Bonk. You'll see how that tries to add ambient occlusion to that, which is really neat. And then we'll blend this with that. Now you'll see it adds this light color into the cracks, like dust got in there, right? So we're not doing it for shadows, we're doing it to kind of add this dusty effect inside. So now what we want to do is make the grout color, which is this blue and this white. So let's blend those together. Blue on the top, white on the bottom. Let's do grunge map 11. That's the one we want. That's the one we want. Click that one in. There we go. That's the effect I'm looking for. See those two colors mixed together in that cool way. Now we need to do our grout. So we're going to blend. Put the brick, our original color over the top. And then plop in our grout color in the second slot. And now we have to use our brick generator again. So let's just grab this one here, or any of them, but whatever we grab, we have to kind of get rid of some of the settings. So let's grab this one. That'll be the easiest. Control C, Control V. Okay. So now we need to just get rid of this, the height. So go to the height section in here and put this down to 0. Now you just get our basic white and black. If you want to test it, you can plug it right in. And now you can start to see the grout. We might, I don't know. We'll see how that looks at the end. But we should warp this up a little bit. Now you could warp it kind of the same way that you warped it down here, just to make sure that you get it's like perfectly in there. But to be perfectly honest with you, it's better to, in my opinion, to warp it not the same way. Because that way it kind of doesn't match perfectly and that looks a little bit more natural. So let's kind of warp this new brick generator a little bit so that when you zoom in here, this isn't as perfect as it is. So let's add a warp. Input into there. Gaussian. Can just leave the settings the same. Let's take a look at our warp here. Let's set this at 0.03. You can look, it's warped a little bit, which is nice. Let's do another warp. You're going to do tons of warps when you make stuff. Black and white spots 2. Plug that puppy in. You'll see it kind of makes that crazy. But we'll dump that down as well. And this warp goes way down to 0.001. You can see the edges there now. See how nice that it adds those little. Now that's pretty much all we need to do, so we can plug that into our blend instead of our original, and we can look at the color map from there. And it just adds that variation. So there we go, we're getting there. So let's move a little bit of this just to make it a little bit more readable. I'm going to kind of pull this to the right. Okay. Okay, there you go. Now you can kind of see better what's going on. Now I want to add a little bit of occlusion in here. Not a ton from the main map that we're plugging into the normal map. So if we zoom in here and we put in an ambient occlusion, RT-AO, and let's connect this blend here, the same one we just connected up there, to our ray trace ambient occlusion. That looks pretty cool. Now, in order to blend that with a color, we have to add a gradient map. So go here and type in gray. Sometimes it pops up first. Pop this into there. And then we're going to blend this with our color map. So put in a blend. We want to blend the ambient occlusion over our color map that we've got going. Okay, so let's blend these over. We'll do the multiply. 0.13. Just adds a very subtle darkening to it. Okay. So now I'm going to add a quick sharpen to this just to sharpen it. Plug that in. Now, intensity pretty low. 0.16, but just for a little bit of sharpening. Okay. And now we just have to add, we had those chips that we did at the end. We just have to add that one last thing in, and we're pretty much ready with our color. So over by these chips that we did, put in a ambient occlusion again. I'm doing it separately just so that you can have different control. Plug that into there. Do a gradient map again because we're blending it with a color map. I'm going to pull my color map out a little bit. I'm going to pull my normal map in. We're going to pull roughness down. We'll pull this over just so everything kind of has a purpose. Let's do our blend. Blend these chip AO over our color. You can see here the end of our color with the sharpen. The chips up, blended together. And then we'll multiply. And this can go down to 0.03. And if you want, you can adjust these numbers. You'll see how things come in and out. I do very subtle values for AO. So let's save that. Now we can finally plug this into our color. And hopefully it looks good because we haven't really been looking at that. So let's delete this uniform, this gray one out here. And we'll just plug our guy in. Bonk. There you go. It's looking pretty good. All right, now that we got the color map done, let's do the roughness map. Now the roughness map is a challenge for a lot of people, but I'm going to give you some pointers. Today we're going to go pretty simple with it because this has been a pretty long tutorial, but when we get into more shiny and glossy surfaces, I'll go into the roughness map a little bit more and we'll kind of give you some pointers to make things kind of stand out from the crowd. But for right now, we're going to use the color map and we're going to convert it to grayscale. A grayscale conversion, a GRAY. Pump that in and let's pop this in there. All right. Now you can see what it's giving us already. And if you're curious, we can just pop that right into our roughness map right there and we can get rid of this. Okay. Okay, and when we plug that in, this is the result that we get, and you can see the crazy shininess, which of course isn't what we want because they're bricks, but you can see, like in general, and you can see a variation, which is nice, but this isn't what we're going to use. It's far too shiny. This would maybe be good in the rain, maybe. So first of all, let's invert the roughness map. So this is the grayscale conversion here, and then we'll look up invert. Grayscale. Pop that in. Now you can see that. Pop our output into roughness. Now you can see things are looking a little bit better. Closer to what we want. Now don't base your roughness on the viewport here. That's one thing I have to mention. I'm going to pull this stuff into Unreal and I'm going to test it in there. We're going to use these materials for future tutorials, so I want to make sure I've got it working good for Unreal and not necessarily the best look here in the 3D view. Otherwise we could, do all sorts of things to make it pop here, but it doesn't make any sense. So now we have our invert grayscale. Let's add levels in because I know this is still going to be way too shiny in Unreal. Now it doesn't look shiny at all here, barely, but in Unreal I know it's going to look too shiny. So we're going to go into levels, pop, and then we'll adjust these sliders. Maybe pull the bottom one up. Kind of see what it's doing there. We can pull the top one down a little bit. That seems okay. It might be a little bit bright, but that's good for now. Let's just save that. Now, one of the things a lot of people do is call that good, and they would just roll with it. But what I like to do for roughness maps is we want to add a roughness over the top, like a shininess layer, because that isn't related to the color or the bump in any way. and it's kind of separate. With shinier surfaces, it makes a lot more sense because you could see where something would get a little scuffed, or you could see where something might have a little bit of gunk on it or whatever. We're going to still do that for the bricks here, just to add some variation. It's not going to make much of a difference in the scene right here, but when we get it over to Unreal, it will. So let's add in Grunge Map. Let's do Grunge Map 1. It's always a good one. Now, this one's fine to have vertical because I want the grunge to kind of be flowing down. Okay? Let's do a levels for that. Because we don't want it quite this contrasty. Let me show you what I mean. Let's plug this into our roughness map. And you can already see it gives this kind of like watery, gunky look, shiny, gunky look around. It's a kind of a cool effect. But that's not necessarily what we want. We want that very, very subtle. So if I plug this into my levels, and let's say we pull our levels to like this and that and make it more subtle. Now we can plug that back into roughness. And even though it's more shiny, it's more subtle effect. Now this is still going to be too shiny in Unreal. You might not even really notice it a whole lot in this, but it's still going to be too shiny. We're going to blend that with our color map that we leveled out and inverted. So do one more last blend and we're just about done, so don't worry. So go bonk, bonk, blend those two together. We can do a multiply. We can pull that in. Now we're going to drop the multiply down quite a bit. And we might have to levels the result a little bit here. But see, I want just a really, really subtle difference here for the roughness mask. Now I know that this is going to be too shiny. And in here you're going to be like, well, what do you mean it's too shiny? It doesn't look shiny at all. But I know in Unreal it's going to look too shiny at that roughness value. So we're going to do one more levels. And we're just going to hope that we get it right. Donk, donk. And let's pump it up a little bit. Maybe something like that. Yeah, that looks good. So that's that. I'm going to go pull this into Unreal, and I'm not going to show that part because I'm going to have a whole tutorial about materials in Unreal and how all that stuff works. But I want to test it out. I want to make sure that this is good so that when we build the rest of our stuff, we don't have to make any changes to this. So I'm going to go do that, and I'll be right back. Thank you. So I'm back. I moved the textures into Unreal, and everything looked pretty good. There was a couple things I want to change, and then we can wrap this up. The changes really aren't that big. The one thing was, I've already made the changes in here, but the one thing was the grout. That blue was way too dark before. Like if you zoom in now, you can see I've changed it. It looks a lot nicer. I'll show you that. That's up here at the top, so let's zoom in. This was the darker color blue. If you open it up, now you can see the new hex value. It kind of makes it lighter, and it blends it in better together, and it really has, it's a much better effect, and you can see that like right here through our grout. And the other thing I did is if we zoom down here, you can see here's where I was making the grunge map, and this was gonna add some crunchiness and some cuts into the actual bricks themselves. And we did this part down here. I added this levels to make it a little bit less strong so that the bumps in were a little bit less. And you can keep them if you want, if you like that effect. But right now I'm going for pretty clean bricks, so I made them a little bit less. If you look at this levels here, you can notice I pulled the slider, this down slider up. I connected the blend into that levels. See, here's what we had originally. The blend into the levels, and then the levels goes into this blend here. Maybe I'll kind of like zoom in to show you that one. So if you have your graph, put a levels. This used to be connected straight into this blend. Now I put this levels in. This levels is this bottom handle is pulled up a little bit. And that's it. Those are the only changes I had to make. I liked everything else. Roughness map looks good for this. So there you go. There's our finished bricks. That was a pretty long tutorial. Probably, I'm guessing it's going to take forever to edit. Hopefully it was followable for you guys. This is going to be the most challenging one we're going to have to make for our starting with Unreal. I still think this is more close to a beginner's tutorial. Maybe people would disagree with that, but I want to explain things a little bit more. So I know it's a little bit longer. I do appreciate you guys watching. I know, but when you explain, you can learn more, and then you can make your own. And then you don't have to rely on my tutorials, and you can start building up your own material base. So in the future, we're going to use these, like I said, for an Unreal project. And we're going to throw them in, and we're going to goof around. I really want to thank you for being here. Give me a subscription if you made it this far. That'd be great. I'm still severely small, severely starting out. I'm trying to hit 100 still. So it would be much appreciated. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, or are at least happy with the results. Bricks are a challenging one, and to make them, you can make them look pretty cheesy, but to get them to look pretty good, it takes a little work. So I want to thank you for sticking around and putting that work in, and I hope you have a great day, and take care.